Afternoon. Welcome to the second installment of Blade Wise. I'm Mike Meredith. I'm the owner and operator of Booger Woods Forge. I make custom knives. I believe in sole authorship of my knives. I make everything about them from start to finish. I decided to start doing this series to cover some topics on custom knives and factory-made knives. I'll be throwing in different stuff from time to time that's blade-related. Today's installment, I wanted to talk about fighting knives. And there's three things that I'm going to cover in here. One, dispelling some myths about the knife as a weapon, and giving you some information that you may know or you may not. And some of the stuff that you do know, I'm going to try to expand on what you do know a little bit. Another thing I'm going to talk about is the design of a fighting knife, and what makes a good or what makes a bad fighting knife in general. And the third thing I'm going to talk about briefly is knife laws. First thing that I want to touch on is the old myth of don't carry a knife to a gunfight. I've heard that I don't know how many times, and one of the last times that I got to hear it that really kind of set me off. I was in a gun shop and I was showing a custom knife that I had made to the owner of that shop. And he and I were talking about that when this big, smelly, beer-bellied guy comes walking in, and he's typical Hanyak, you know, and he said, well, you know, that's all well and nice, but don't bring a knife to a gunfight. I told him, I said, well, you know, that is very true. You don't want to bring a knife to a gunfight. But what most people define as a gunfight is actually close quarters enough to be considered also a knife fight. The average combat handgun distance in the United States, as far as what figures I've been able to compile, is 15 feet. That is not a very large distance between you and your adversary. So if a guy already has his knife in his hand and he's ready to play, and you have your pistol holstered, there's a very good chance that you will never clear leather before you are grievously wounded bad enough that it may cause the end of your life before you're able to finish that fight. I had mixed emotions and reservations about even talking about this subject, because I don't ever want to be guilty of giving bad people information that they can use to hurt good people with. But bad people are so inventive, and they tend to network among themselves. So I figure if I can save one life with talking about this, then I'll do so, because that's part of my mission. Going back to the 15 feet away thing, if you're 15 feet away, you're within about 3 steps of someone. So there's something that's shown to a lot of law enforcement students, a lot of people in police academies. It's called the 3-step drill. That's just start out with a holstered training weapon. Don't ever train with live steel or real bullets. With a training weapon, dummy gun, and have it in your holster, and see if chalk up the edges of a training knife, and see if you don't have chalk marks on you before you get that pistol clear to leather. Now, it's not that you might not take your opponent out with a well-placed shot, but you could. It's still a bad thing to be killed by a man who's dying too. I mean, it could be a no-win situation for you. So my advice to anyone that is on the side of right, that finds himself in a confrontation with a blade-wielding attacker, is start trying to put distance between you and him to make it harder for him to close before you can draw your weapon. On the opposite side of that, if you're the one with a blade and your attacker has a gun, close that distance quick and try to disable him in a way that's going to render him and his weapon useless. Something that I see a lot of mall ninjas and people that are trying to be tactical talk about whenever they're showing drills on the internet is, well, let's just go ahead and you can finish your opponent with this blow. No, you only use enough force necessary to bring the attack to end of story. And another myth that a lot of martial artists tend to perpetuate is that there are takeaway methods. You can take a guy's blade away from him. If you want to find out just how ineffective your takeaway techniques are, give your average 8-year-old kid that's all hopped up on Mountain Dew and candy bars a Sharpie marker and say, okay, now come at me with that, and I'm going to try to take it away from you. Just every place that you've got a mark, if it's a long mark, remember that would be a slash, and if it's a dot, remember it would be a puncture. And see if that's something that you would be willing to give away if that were a real fight with a knife-wielding attacker. The knife's potential as a weapon is tremendous, and has been throughout history and continues to be. So some people ask me, well, what is the best fighting knife design? Unfortunately, I don't have with me at this time a knife that I have designed or made. What I do have is just something I'm going to point out. I'm not saying that this is a great fighting knife. This is the Buck Model 119. This is a mid-'80s version of this, given to me by my dad. I wouldn't take $1 million for it because it means a lot to me. This was a common private purchase knife during the Vietnam War. It has a Bowie-style blade, which I prefer in a fighting knife. It also has a clip point. This one's not sharpened. I prefer a sharpened clip point in a Bowie-style blade because it gives you the option of a back cut, which is really fast and hard to defend against. In other words, if your attacker is up on you, he's pretty much closed the jaws of that trap on himself by allowing you to make that back cut. I pretty much insist on my definition of a fighting knife. It needs to have a Bowie-style blade. It could have a dagger-style blade. I don't prefer a dagger-style blade because, well, for one thing, dagger is just so single-purpose, and it's a penetrating type of weapon. That's another thing. Stab wounds tend to be way more effective than cuts as far as ending an attack, defending yourself. However, when you get stopped and you've got a dagger, there's really only one purpose for that. A Bowie can mean a lot of different things, but really a Bowie that's made in its purebred form is really only a weapon too. I think that unlike that, the 120 has a slightly larger blade. I believe that a fighting knife should have at least a 9-inch blade. That it allows for a lot of leverage. You can get a whole lot. You have a whole lot more to work with there. Unfortunately, most people are not willing to pack around a blade with 9 inches long on them. It can be done easily, unobtrusively. The only thing you got to do is stick it back here in a tuck-in sheath, and the handle is the only thing exposed. Where your wallet and everything else is going to cover that. Is going to cover that area quite nicely, and it's going to be unseen. Just put a concealment garment over it. Keep in mind, anything I'm suggesting, do it within the laws of where you live. I think that a knife should be fast. Anything 1/4 of an inch thick, 5/16 of an inch thick, to me is not suitable for a fighting knife. It can start out at 1/4 inch, but it needs to have distal taper. And I've drawn a diagram here. If you took this blade and turned it up edgewise like that, where you're looking at the top of the spine, and I've greatly exaggerated this to make it obvious. Here's where that clip point starts out. There's your edge. It should start out narrow and then widen. It should have some forging taper. It makes it fast and light in the hand. Remember, like the old saying goes, speed kills. So you want it to be fast. I'll be talking about this more. I'm going to make another fighting knife here soon. Every one that I've ever made for myself, somebody sees it and they like it better than I do, and they offer me more than I think it's worth, and I'll go ahead and sell it to them at that point usually. So with the knife having a potential as a weapon the way that it does, a lot of people would ask me, well, if you're interested in saving lives and you don't want to see good people get hurt, why wouldn't you think that these knife laws are a good idea? Most people who don't live in the areas affected by this are unaware, but your knife rights are under serious assault in a lot of areas, have been for years. New York City, for example, they're considering anything that locks open once that inertia is applied to it to be a gravity knife. It just, that's not a gravity knife by definition, but that's what they're calling it. So they're banning locking folders. and there's been a big stink about it. You can read about it online. Just type in New York City gravity knife laws in Google, and you'll pull up a lot of stuff there. Another thing, in areas that you wouldn't expect for knife freedoms to be under fire, they are heavily. In Texas, if you're caught carrying a blade that's over 5.5 inches long, you're committing a crime, and you don't. Like I said, I encourage everybody to obey the law. The best protection you have of your freedom is to be a law-abiding citizen. End of story. So obey the law. But you might join movements that will try to turn that around. In San Antonio, Texas, if a folder locks open like this one does, then it's illegal. Why? That's a safety feature. You don't want that. Without that locking mechanism, that blade can close on your hand and hurt you when you're using the knife for mundane tasks. Locking blades are not designed as a weapon feature. It's a tool feature. It's absurd. That needs to come to an end. God help you if you live in Great Britain. They have gone so far as to start going after kitchen knives. In Great Britain, this knife is illegal. It has to have a stab-proof point. It has to have a rounded point. And if you own a full butcher set, as I understand it, if my advices from sources are correct, you have to have a special permit to even keep butcher knives in your house. That is, every one of us have a piece of poop like this in our house that we use to cut stuff with. Another reason that I'm totally against any kind of laws restricting knives, or really any other small arms or weapons, is because they don't work. Criminals are very inventive people. That fork, tell me that if that thing wound up in one of your arteries or your gut pile, that you wouldn't be in a world of trouble. It could end your life just as sure as the best made knife. This pole barn nail right here, 6-inch long pole barn nail, with a little bit of doctrine and a little bit of work, any unskilled worker can turn that into something that will kill you graveyard dead. So what do? We're going to ban pole barn nails and forks. During the First World War, these trenching shovels, not like this one, this is a 1940s model, but trenching shovels were very widely prized combat weapons in close quarters trench warfare. That's another instance of they took knives and melee weapons to gunfights and they won. Trench maces, clubs, the M1917 trench knife, all of them carried the day for the United States. Amid a lot of small arms, even rifles, because maneuverability of those is not very great in the trench. And handguns, all handguns are underpowered. They just take a 9mm 40 caliber or 45, hold it up to your chest, and you'll see what a small hole that it'll make. Yeah, because humans are, for medical purposes, are easy to kill, hard to stop quickly. Because whenever a body is dumping a lot of cortisol and epinephrine, you get an adrenaline rush, and that fight or flight syndrome, you don't feel pain as much. You just, it's really a bad thing to be up against an attacker that has that going on for them. So anybody that doubts the ineffectiveness of knife laws, go to any correctional facility and say, I want to see some of the shanks that your inmates have made that you call them. You're going to find a vast array of pieces of pipe strap, toothbrush handles. None of them are pretty. Nobody wants one in their custom knife collection, but every one of them is brutally effective at ending a human life in the hands of the wrong person. So enough of the nonsense with trying to ban knives. Let's keep America a free place. That's pretty much all I have for you now. Soon, I hope to be presenting to you some more fighting knives that I have made myself. Another thing before I part is I just want to say, as a seller, I try to be responsible of who I sell a knife to. If I'm talking to a guy that is some mall ninja or some guy that I'm thinking he may use it for You know, and it's got to be pretty obvious, you know, that maybe he's not quite responsible enough to handle something like that. I won't sell it to him. Not that he can't go buy it from somebody else, but it's just not going to be on my conscience that he used my knife to do a bad deed with. Until next time, stay sharp, stay safe. Thanks.